So let's picture America in the mid-1700s. The idea of completely breaking away from Great Britain, that wasn't just some radical thought. For most people, it was pretty much unthinkable. See, most colonists still saw themselves as loyal British subjects. So how in the world did they go from trying to make peace to declaring full-blown independence in just a few months? Well, the answer is pretty incredible, and it lies in two documents that capture one of the most dramatic turnarounds in public opinion ever.
And this was the huge question, the one that every single person in the American colonies had to ask themselves. Do you try to fix this really strange relationship with, the most powerful empire on the planet? Or do you risk absolutely everything for a future that nobody can even really imagine yet? This was the debate happening everywhere, in pubs, on street corners, and inside the halls of power.
You can imagine, people were totally torn. This was a true fork in the road, a really painful choice. And the entire conflict, this whole dilemma, is perfectly captured by two documents. One was a final, desperate plea for peace sent to a king, and the other was a fiery pamphlet written for the average person. And look, the anger was totally real, and it was spreading. Things like these ridiculous taxes or being forced to let British soldiers live in your house, these were everyday frustrations. But the big one, taxation without representation, that wasn't just some catchy slogan. To them, it felt like a deep betrayal of their basic rights. And yet, even with all this tension bubbling up, the goal for so many people still wasn't a new country. It was just to get their rights as Englishmen respected. Okay, so this is where our first document comes in, the Olive Branch Petition. You can think of it as the colonists' last-ditch effort to slam the brakes on this runaway train that was heading straight for war. It was a direct, formal, and really respectful appeal to their king. And this quote right here, it really sums up the whole vibe of the petition. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a demand for revolution. No way. It was a message that basically said, let's work this out. They wrote it in the most loyal and polite language you can imagine. The key thing to get here is that they were trying to solve the problem from inside the British Empire.
So, in the summer of 1775, the Second Continental Congress sends this document straight to King George III. They actually went around Parliament appealing directly to him, hoping he'd step in and protect his subjects. In return for ending all the harsh rules, they promised they'd stay loyal to the crown. It was their final, totally sincere offer to avoid a war.
Everything was riding on how the king would respond. If he'd sent back a thoughtful reply, who knows? History could have gone in a completely different direction. The conflict might have cooled down, and the colonies could have stayed part of the empire. But, well, that's not what happened. The king's decision was about to become the point of no return. Can you just imagine the tension? This one letter, carrying all the hopes for peace for so many colonists, is making its way across the Atlantic Ocean. It's the result of months of arguments and careful wording. It is literally the last chance to stop a devastating war from breaking out. And here it is, the gut punch. King George III didn't just reject the ideas in the petition. He refused to even read it, wouldn't even lay eyes on it. Why? Because to him, the letter didn't come from loyal subjects. It came from an illegal Congress, and in his mind, the colonists were already traitors. So instead of an olive branch, the king's response was basically a sword. He officially declared that the colonies were in a state of open rebellion. This wasn't just a political disagreement anymore. He had just defined it as treason. He sent more troops, effectively slamming the door shut on any hope for a peaceful solution. So with the door to peace slammed shut, this huge vacuum is created. And right into that void steps a writer named Thomas Paine. And he brought with him a truly radical new idea, all wrapped up in a little pamphlet that was about to set the colonies on fire. It was called Common Sense.
And the difference between these two documents? It's like night and day. The Olive Branch Petition was written for a king. It used fancy, formal language to beg him to make things right. Common Sense, on the other hand, was written for everybody else, the farmer, the blacksmith, the person on the street. It used simple, direct language to argue for revolution. It totally changed the entire conversation.
Paine's arguments were just electric, because they cut right through centuries of tradition. He wasn't just arguing about tax policy. He was attacking the very idea of having a king in the first place. He laid out these simple, logical points, like how is it okay for a tiny island to rule a massive continent? It made trying to patch things up seem like a silly fantasy. All of a sudden, independence wasn't just some crazy idea anymore. It was the only path that made any sense. So, think about it. what happens when your king rejects your final plea for peace. And then, at that exact moment, a brilliant writer gives you a powerful, common sense argument for freedom. Well, you get one of the fastest, most incredible shifts in public opinion you can imagine. You get a revolution, not just of armies, but of minds. I mean, just look at this transformation. In a matter of months, the entire mindset changed. The argument went from, we are loyal subjects who want peace, to, we are a free people who deserve to govern ourselves. The king went from being their last hope for justice to being a tyrant. And the goal? The goal shifted from trying to stay in the British Empire to creating a brand new independent republic. It's absolutely breathtaking. And if you want proof of this huge shift, just look at the numbers. Common Sense sold over 120,000 copies in just 3 months. Now, in a population of about 2.5 million people, that's an absolutely massive reach. This wasn't some stuffy document only read by the elites. This was read aloud in bars, it was debated on street corners, and it convinced a huge part of the population that independence wasn't just possible, it was necessary. So, the story of these two documents leaves us with a really big question. The Olive Branch Petition, it failed. But in a weird way, its failure created the perfect opening for Common Sense to succeed. It just goes to show how sometimes rejection can open the door for a revolution. And it really makes you wonder, just how powerful can a single idea be, especially when it arrives at exactly the right moment?